your flesh and blood.
Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here with our very special guest who's written a lot, but he's in this case talking about a specific thing that we're going to talk about that I think that you will find. I hope we're going to do our utmost to keep the conversation as positive as we can, and it's not always easy, but at least on track. And we're going to be talking about a book he's written. His name is Ira Chaleff, and he's written a book called To Stop a Tyrant. The subtitle is the power of political followers to make or break a toxic leader. Ira, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I've been skimming through, especially your website and the book and all kinds of information. And I'm also an observer of what's going on. And I don't necessarily give my opinion as much as I give my observations. And in my perspective, that's a big difference because what I'm seeing is this, and you have an opinion, but see, what is that based on? I'm telling you what I see. And then I try to use logic to try to understand what's going on. Thank you for being with us.
Well, you're very welcome. I love your mission, and I hope I contribute to that for your listeners today. I'd like to say that the most important words in the title of this book are the power of political followers. That's the positive message. We're talking about your power wherever you are, whomever you support, whatever place you occupy in our wonderful, flawed, brilliant democracy, and how you can use that power more effectively to get the outcomes that will serve us all well, which aligns with the mission of this program. So thank you again for inviting me to this conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I guess what we'll start out by saying is this is not a new situation. I mean, some might say, well, you're doing this. This is politically motivated, because of who's in office today. But the reality, if I'm understanding correctly, is that this is nothing, what's happening is nothing new. This has been part of our, shall we say, the zeitgeist for generations, and the accusations as well. Am I accurate in that, or is this based upon current events?
It is not based on current events. I could say that I started writing this book 75 years ago. What do I mean by that? I was raised in a multi-generational family, and my maternal grandmother lost her family in the Holocaust. And as a very young child, I became aware of this. They would have friends come into the house in the summertime, sleeveless, and I would see these numbers tattooed on their arms. In those days, not many of us had tattoos, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a kid, I would go, well, what are those? And I was told, shh, shh, we don't talk about that. And we'd be very, very nice to these people. Well, it took me a few years to figure out what that was about. And it was about a terrible, destructive leader being elected in Germany. We tend to forget that. And that the German people, on the whole, supported him for various reasons. And that was to their great, great regret, because 12 years later, their country was in ruins. My question, I didn't really know how to formulate the question then, but the implicit question I started to carry with me in life was, how does that happen? How do people who are very destructive or have destructive tendencies, how are they allowed to get into those positions of power? And is there any way that we could do this differently so that we don't keep repeating throughout history on every continent the fact that destructive leaders rise to power and we pay the price? That's what this book is about. That's what all of my books are about in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Well, you have some other books. I'm just going to go over some of the titles here. Intelligent Disobedience, Doing Right When What You're Told to Do is Wrong. I also like The Courageous Follower, Standing Up to and For Our Leaders. Then you have one here that's a celebration of followers, the story in documents of courageous followers and the fellowship. I love that word, the fellowship community. And then you have one for that's for not for kids, but it's about intelligent obedience for children.
Intelligent disobedience for
I beg your
children.
pardon. Did I read that? Disobedience, intelligent disobedience for children. Blink, think, choose, and voice. By the way, my book, Choices, 5 Steps for Life, ties right in there because all of these have to do with choice. And I guess one of the things that I find so fascinating about all of this, Ira, and this, again, we can use your example going back to the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s. We can go back even further than that to other tyrants and so forth. And what I find so fascinating is, and maybe I'm wrong in my observation here, the unwillingness of the followers to see what's right in front of them, i.e., the behavior. I love what, I quote this quite often from Martin Luther King. Let us be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. All right, we'll set aside that last part. Let's judge the leadership by their character. How in the Sam Hill did somebody like Adolf or anybody else down through history ever get elected? And that's a very interesting point you bring up, that he was elected. And they didn't what? They didn't want to see shall we say, the flaws? And that's not to say that we don't all have flaws. We do. But when it comes to leadership, the behavior is such that it's like, I mean, I'm going to use one case in point, the family values issue that I've been hearing about since the 80s. I worked for a Christian radio station back in Phoenix, and I was surrounded by all these folks talking about family values. Well, they're still talking about it. And yet they've had an individual within the government doing a particular job who certainly doesn't represent the traditional family values that you and I might espouse to, husband, wife, male, female, children, two cars in every garage, a chicken in every pot, et cetera, picket fence. If that's our model of family values. Here's a gentleman who has multiple children by multiple women, and I don't even think the guy is married. I could mention his name. I think we all know who I'm talking about. But it's that kind of blindness to that kind of character, and yet the followers, they're the ones who say, oh, yeah, we want to return to traditional family values. And they have this individual who's behaving in this fashion.
Well, let's
Go
take a
ahead,
big
please.
step back here,
Please.
because this is a lifelong journey I've been on,
Hmm.
and I want to make sure that I don't jump 100 miles ahead of people who are just starting to consider these ideas. And let me start with the idea of being a follower.
Okay.
Now, in some places, like the Christian church or followers of Dr. King, being a follower is considered honorable. But most of the time, we're told, particularly in America, oh, you don't want to be a follower. Don't be a follower. You want to be a leader. Well, if everyone was a leader all the time, no one would be leading because the one thing a leader needs is a follower. So we can't all be leading at every moment. And we have to recognize that there's a dance that happens between leaders and followers. It's like a tango. It's like any kind of a ballroom dance. You
Hmm.
want a beautiful dance? You better have the leader and the follower dancing well, dancing with strength, not depending on the other, but contributing to the beauty of the dance. So, what my last 40 years effort has been is to reposition in our minds what does it mean to follow, to be a follower. It's not a personality type, it's not a loser, it's a role we all play at some times. And sometimes you are a leader of your congregation. And sometimes you're a follower in your diocese or whatever it is. We
Hmm.
all play both roles. And how we play them with integrity, with strength, with sensitivity, with humanity, that's what makes for great outcomes. So that's where I want to start with your listeners reconceiving the idea of what does it mean to follow. Then we can place it into following in their workplace, following in their church, following in politically, and we can start to talk about poor ways of doing that and better ways of doing that.
Yeah. Well, it's to me, it's important that we take a look at all of this because our future depends on it, or I guess I should rephrase that. The kind of future that we want depends on that. But not all of us want the same future. And that's one of the things, for example, on this program, we talk about new paradigms for a new world, giving people choices and knowledge of those choices to help make their dreams come true and looking for those new ways of living because the old ways don't work. Just look around you, they don't work, because there is no, not equality, there is no equity. There is no balance, if you will. We're trying to make this world a better place for everyone, but everybody has a different definition of what is better. So how is it that we're going to come together in this regard when we have leaders, not just political leaders? And I know that's primarily what you focus on because you mentioned the clergy. And I was watching a documentary that I was kind of reliving the history back in the 80s of televangelism and how these people, they thought they were, I don't know, how to put it. They had the right hand in God's hand or something of this nature. And it's and of course many people have learned that hey, I don't need to go through you, I can go straight to God. And I've said often, hey, God knows my number, I'll even take the call collect. Okay, but
Richard,
yes.
you're hitting on something fundamental here that we have, we're in a democracy. Thank God. We're in a
Okay, now
democracy.
hold on before you go further. You say we're in a democracy, but there are those who say we're in a republic.
Good. That's technically correct. You're absolutely right. We're not in a direct democracy. We're in a representational democracy.
Hmm.
So no quibbles with that
Okay.
whatsoever.
To continue.
Yes. Now, the point is, think about it for a moment. In our country, we have something like 340 million people.
Mm.
There is no way in God's green earth that 340 million people are going to have the same vision. That just won't happen. Now, what the purpose of representational democracy is, and I mean representational down at your town, your city, your state, the
Hmm.
government, is to have a forum where the conversations can happen that work out these differences as best as possible so that a compromise, which is not a dirty word in politics, is it's a necessary word, not compromising your values, but compromising your where you like to see the world be right now when someone wants to see it exactly the opposite. Well, how are you going to achieve this without physical or armed conflict? You see, this is the point. Politics and governance is the alternative to armed conflict. And that's why it is so critical. That is why we have to have the institutions in where we can come together. There are certain rules of etiquette, of respect, of equity, as you're correctly saying, and we can have heated, we can have stormy conversations, but they have to be conversations
Yeah.
until we work through some agreement that we can live with. That's what that's what governing is about, and that's what citizenship is about, and that's what following and leading about are about. Followers need to be able to tell their leaders how they see the world, how they would like it to be, but recognize if you're talking to your member of Congress, they have 800,000 other constituents who are
Yeah.
going to come to them with very different views, and somehow they have to figure out how will they best represent as the most essential elements of those views, and then have the discussions with the 435 other members of the House of Representatives. This is tough stuff, and this is why I talk about we have to be both supporting our leaders and challenging them. We can't just say, they're a bunch of jerks, they're a bunch of no goods, they're corrupt. No, it is very, very difficult to actually lead, whether in a congregation or in a government or even a company. Companies are easier because they have a little bit more direct command and control, but
Mm.
not in government. So not in representative republics, at least.
Hmm.
So what I'm trying to do in my books is help people to take a look at how do they fit in this dynamic of following and leading? And how can they do that more effectively? And in this current book, it's in the political world. Regardless of who you support, this is a pristinely nonpartisan book. Regardless of who you support or who you are against, and where you are in the system, whether you're an insider, an outsider, a middle sider, how can you make a difference? That's what this book is designed to do.
Yeah. I heard a bit by the late George Carlin, who basically stated, and I paraphrase, the politicians are not the problem. It's the voters. They're the ones who put these people in there. So don't blame the politicians for what they're doing because you put them in there, you know. And
Yes, that I agree that that's half the story.
okay.
The other half of the story is the system itself. I've worked with over 100 members of Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, in my work. I did nonprofit, nonpartisan work, trying to help members of Congress do their jobs better and utilize their staff better. And I have found that most of them come with a lot of um, sense of values, idealism. They come to Washington And then the system doesn't necessarily corrupt them, though it can, but it molds them. And we need to look at how our system could be tweaked, not radically overturned in any sense,
Mm.
but improved. And again, my books examine some of these kinds of issues because it's one thing to elect a person of good character. It's another thing to help them stay in office with all of the pressures they are under and remain true to their character. And that's what followers can do.
They say that there's something in the water when you were talking about Washington, D.C. There's something in the water. And they do go there with, stars in their eyes, idealism, the values, all of those things that they had when they were back at home. And so, and as you say, the system has an effect on them in one way or the other. This is a fascinating conversation. We are talking about the book that Ira has published. It's the most recent one of his. It's called To Stop a Tyrant, The Power of Political Followers to Make or Break a Toxic Leader. Ira Chaleff is my guest. This is Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan here with Ira Chaleff, and we are talking about his book, of course, To Stop a Tyrant, and we're not labeling any specific person a tyrant. Go through history from the present day all the way back, and I guess that would be the next question: is there a is there definition of what a tyrant is?
Yeah,
Because
I'm glad you
everybody,
asked.
I mean, for example, the left says that presently the guy in the Oval Office is a tyrant, but the right says no, no, he's the second coming. I mean, and I'm not being facetious there. People have actually said I saw this. They refer to him as the Orange Jesus.
I understand. I've seen that as well.
Yeah.
The and I'm very clear in my book. Those on the right, they sometimes have seen a particular individual as a tyrant. More often, they're seeing the bureaucracy, which is they're calling the deep state, as
Hmm.
tyrannical.
Right.
And those on the left are seeing a strong authoritarian styled leader as a tyrant. Now, in my book, I explain that people don't walk into politics typically and on day one are a tyrant. They can't be. They don't have enough power.
Yeah.
What happens is that one way or another, they get into office. And the people that they surround themselves with are very important because if they surround themselves with truth sayers who can say, "Boss, you're going too far here," or "You've got a blind spot there," they're doing their leader a great service. If they surround themselves with sycophants who will only tell them what they think they want to hear, the leader is in great danger because they won't see the cow pie when they're about to step in it.
Hmm.
So they need truth tellers around them. The the office itself tends to create a bubble. This is certainly not my unique observation. Um, and it becomes very difficult for the holder of the office to actually stay in touch with what's happening. You remember, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but I remember back, I think it was Jimmy Carter who was asked, what's the price of milk this week? And he didn't know. And you see, because he didn't have to go shopping for milk. And you
Exactly.
and I have to go shopping for milk.
Hmm.
And we know the price. And if you're feeding a family of six, you really know the price. You see, so there's this disconnect that tends to happen the higher up you go, which is why it becomes more and more critical for the people right around them, their inner circle, the next circle, the circle below that, to all find ways to be truth tellers. Now, I've invented a term in my book. I call it a proto-tyrant. Now, you know what a prototype is.
Hmm.
A prototype is an early version of something
Hmm.
that's going to eventually become whatever it was supposed to become. A proto-tyrant is someone who is not a tyrant, but they have some of the earmarks, some of the behaviors of a tyrant. And, many corporate leaders, many politicians display these characteristics.
Hmm.
What we want to do is make sure that people around them interrupt that tendency to try to become a tyrant as early as possible. You got a fire, small fire, bucket of sand puts it out. Large fire, all you can do is run for your life. So we want to stop this behavior as soon as possible. A lot of what I'm talking about in my book is how to do that no matter where you are. But what is it? You asked me what is the definition of a tyrant.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I did my research, I didn't know this before I did my research. There is a difference between a dictator and a tyrant.
Okay.
Now, a dictator was an appointed position in Rome when the Roman Senate was faced with an existential crisis, external or internal. They would appoint one person with complete powers to do anything they needed to do to resolve that crisis. Unquestioning power. They were a dictator, but they were only given 6 months. And after that, they weren't the dictator anymore. They could ask for an extension for another 6 months, but it wasn't supposed to go beyond that.
Hmm.
If it went beyond that, which that was the problem was once you get a taste of being a dictator, some don't want to give it up, then you slip into being a tyrant. And the difference is a tyrant has no legitimate power whatsoever and exercises their power not for your benefit or my benefit or anyone else's benefit but their own, and they use their power cruelly and oppressively. And that's what history is full of. These horrible tyrants, who set up gulags and, torture prisons and countries that are themselves prisons, if you will, on the left and on the right, absolutely equally in
Hmm.
history.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if absolutely, but certainly largely.
Yeah.
So, what we're trying to do is recognize the human condition.
Right. No
None of us
perspective.
are angels.
Yeah.
Our founding fathers said if men were angels, government wouldn't be needed. So we're not angels, but government is needed. And then the problem becomes, per the founding fathers, how do we make sure the government doesn't then become the oppressor?
Yeah.
And our whole system is designed to try to do that. And in my book, I'm looking at all the ways we have to stand up for our system to make sure that our leaders have enough power to do what they need to do, but not more power than that. And certainly don't undermine the democratic checks on power. That's what my work is about.
Yeah. I know that there are those listening who, are obvious. Some are concerned, depending upon their which side of the aisle they're on. They're concerned about the other side and what they're doing or not doing, and so forth. And that we have three branches of government if we're talking at the federal level, and one of those branches has basically given the other, in a manner of speaking, carte blanche to do whatever they want without fear of legal retribution. In other words, as long as you're doing it under the title of the office, um, it's not going to be a crime.
I assume you're referring to the Supreme Court's decision
Yes.
on presidential immunity in many, many situations.
Hmm.
I think what they were trying to do is give protection to former presidents, which is actually an understandable goal. If we look at many South American countries or elsewhere, we find that African countries, we find that once a person is out of office, their political enemies will often attack them legally and throw them in jail, which sets up a terrible disincentive for letting go of power.
Mm.
So I'm being charitable here, but I think that that was at least a significant part of the thinking of the Supreme Court to not get us in, for us to not get into a similar situation. Having said that, I agree with you that they have taken their eye off the ball, regardless of this ruling or that ruling and how it can be legally justified. They seem to be losing, in my opinion, the larger picture of the founding fathers saying we must maintain checks and on power, checks and balances on power.
Hmm.
And the concatenation of rulings seems to be undermining that. I don't know how we get out of that because historically, Supreme Court rulings that have been dreadful,
Hmm.
like Dred Scott, um, take a long time to reverse.
Yeah.
So I think where we can go with this instead is to the third branch of government, which is Congress.
Hmm.
And Congress has, in most observers' eyes, flagrantly given up the powers the Constitution allots to it.
Hmm.
And they are setting the stage for an over-concentration of power. And that we can change every 2 years, you see. So I think it's more important that we focus on what does Congress need to do differently. I'm not talking about policy in
Right.
this sense. Um, you may not like the fact that this president was elected and their policies are now being implemented. But you do need to respect the political system. You're charged, if you don't like them, with being loyal opposition. And there are many, many ways you can legally and correctly oppose them. But nevertheless, they do have the power. As is
Mhm.
often said, elections have consequences.
That's
Now,
right.
what I'm concerned about, and the only thing I'm really fundamentally concerned about, is that Congress is allowing the executive to take over the functions that the Constitution allot to it over the purse, over creating legislation that creates agencies, and that the power of oversight of those agencies. So much of that has just been given away.
Yeah.
And it may seem expedient because then it's easier to get things done. But this is always the pitfall of authoritarianism. Yes, authoritarians are better at getting things done than democracies. There's no question about it.
Hmm.
But at what price? And in the long run, those countries and those citizens, those voters who give away too much democracy for the sake of efficiency and effectiveness rue the day, really regret it. So I think we have to do some course correction. I understand why the executive has been given and taken more power. There are a lot of things that weren't being addressed sufficiently that a strong executive is better equipped to addressing. But it's got to stay in balance, or we are going to no longer recognize the constitutional government that we have.
Ira Chaleff, my guest, to stop a tyrant, the power of political followers to make or break a toxic leader here on Tell Me Your Story. I want to ask you, Ira, author of To Stop a Tyrant, about a focus that we go into quite often, and that has to do with the soul of things. We talk with individuals about their story and about their inner life, if you will, and how they came to obviously be on the program and talk about the subjects that they are. But I want to talk to you about your observations, your perspectives on The soul of America in particular. Two things I want to bring up very fast because I want your input on this. Number one is when I hear moaning and groaning and complaining on either side, I always tell them, I said, well, it's not anybody else's fault but your own that your person didn't get elected because you didn't get enough of your people to go out and vote to make sure that your person got elected. And that to me is really the bottom line. And primarily I say those things to these people because I want them to stop complaining. I can't stand the whining anymore. And the second thing has to do with that whining, that it's somebody else's fault that we are where we are. And I say, no, my book Choices talks about how we all make choices and that whether it's elections or choices, they all have consequences, and we have to be responsible. We are, if we are in a bad state of affairs, personally, citywide, state, or nationally, it's not because anybody did anything to us. It's what we did to ourselves. And we're not willing, apparently, we are not grown up enough as a nation, almost 250 years old, to take full responsibility for who and what and where we are. Your perspective on that when it comes to this aspect of the followers and the leaders.
Wow, there's so many ways we could go from that very well stated set of observations. The soul of America. Well, the soul, as Thomas Paine wrote, um, just during the dark days of the revolution, we have it within our power to remake the world. Wow, what a vision!
Mm.
And wasn't just blowing smoke. It
No,
was
not at all.
really, it really set the pattern to remaking the world. Now, all things mankind does are imperfect. We know that. And therefore, our greatest gift in this country has been the capacity to collectively revisit periodically where we are and how the imperfections are keeping us divided and distant from the vision that we hold for this country. There are so many ways in which that is being assaulted now that it's a really significant problem. I like what you said about maybe we're not grown up enough. I tend to use the word mature enough.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be mature enough as individuals and as citizens. We can't blame our parents for why, we are the way we are. Um, we neither can we blame our political leaders for the way things are. We have to understand that life is very complex. All of us are dealing with complex sets of dynamics that test us, that call us to bring out our better angels, to find support when we start to fail, to give support when our brethren and sisters fail. We are in this together. So are our leaders. And I know it's very, very common and popular, for example, at work, if one works anywhere, to kind of have this snide backbiting about our managers,
Mm-hmm.
kind of the Dilbert thing. Oh, they're all doofuses, They're not. They're human beings
Yeah.
who are dealing with very complex issues and pressures. Some do it better, much better than others. Those we value greatly. Some do it poorly. Our job, and this is what I take up in great detail in The Courageous Follower, our job is to make them into a better leader.
Hmm.
Maybe their job is to make us into better in our role. Our job is equally to make them better in their role.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of maturity. That takes not whining. That takes figuring out how to do it. I give a lot of examples of how to do it in my book, The Courageous Follower.
Hmm.
In my book, Intelligent Disobedience, which is, I keep, every time I write a book and teach about it, I learn from the people that I'm interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
One day I was teaching a class on courageous following, and I talked about how most of the time it makes sense to support authority, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they're wrong and we need to not follow what they're saying. And this woman raised her hand and said she had an example of this under the table. What did she have under the table?
Hmm.
She had a dog under the table. And she said that dog was being trained to be a guide dog for a blind person.
Hmm.
And that for the first 18 months of its life, it lived with her family to socialize it. So it learned how to be so quiet under the table that I didn't even know it was there and how to follow all the commands it needed to know. She said then it goes to a higher level trainer to teach it, after it's learned how to obey, to teach it intelligent disobeying. I said, what's that? I've never heard about that. She said, well, think about it. If a guide dog is going down the street with a person who's lost their sight and they get a command to go forward because the person thinks it's safe, but the guide dog can hear or can see a quiet hybrid car coming around the corner, it must not obey. And because if it obeys, it'll do great harm. And if it can't learn to distinguish between when to obey and when to disobey, it can't be a guide dog.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, we can teach dogs that.
Yeah.
Why aren't we teaching humans that?
Yeah.
And that's what my book on intelligent disobedience is about. How most of the time obeying authority makes sense. Sometimes it really doesn't. And how do we know the distinction and how do we do it well? And that's where I then went into our early childhood education. We're taught to obey, 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 which is okay within limits until some adult tells a child to do something very harmful to them. And we haven't equipped the child with how to intelligently disobey. So, um, so you can see the thread in my work. It's
Mm-hmm.
how do we personally, how do we as breadwinners, how do we as managers and supervisors and employees, and how do we as political citizens, how do we take this relationship of following and leading and bring it to a higher level, a higher moral level, a higher functional level? And I know from experience from people who read my books and get back to me that they can make a big difference in the reader's life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it does say in the commandments, honor thy mother and thy father. But it doesn't mean that carry out every single time. If they asked you to walk off the roof of the house, without anything below you to catch you, I don't think most children would do that.
Well,
Maybe just
what's
out of
so
fear.
interesting, Richard, about that is many of our parents flip that around and they say, um, if everybody jumped off a cliff, would you jump off a cliff?
Yeah,
'Cause they don't want you to be blind followers,
right.
but they don't then take the lesson to the next step. That includes don't be a blind follower of authority figures.
Yeah.
You have to judge for yourself. And this is why my work, to my great gratitude, has found such footholds in the military because the military know that if they're given an order that and they know on the ground, no, you're telling me to fire, and that it would be I would be killing our own troops by friendly fire. I have to know to not obey that, and I
Mm.
have to have the courage to not obey that. Um, so the military, because life and death is at stake all the time in battle,
Right.
they really appreciate this. So wherever you are in life, wherever you are in the political spectrum, I am encouraging you to take a step back and think, how do I follow? And do I need to follow differently? And if I follow differently, how would it help my family? How would it help my workplace? How would it help my country?
Now, being courageous, that's wonderful. And being disobedient in that respect, intelligently disobedient, is also true. But there's a part that I think we need to address real quickly here before we pause again, and that is taking responsibility. And I will tell you that I was at this Christian station for 15 years, and the one thing I kept hearing over and over again, or maybe I should say I wasn't hearing, was the fact that they were unwilling to take personal responsibility for their lives. If good things happened, oh, that's God. If bad things happened, oh, that's the devil. It's like, what are you, a puppet on a string being manipulated by forces you do not understand? And I'm sitting here saying to like, for example, women who get pregnant, are you 10% pregnant, 20%, 30%? If you're pregnant 100%. Why can't, and it seems to me that folks also have to be willing to take responsibility for whatever, whether they be intended or unintended consequences when they are being intelligently disobedient. Your thoughts?
You're absolutely right. And some of this is very sophisticated because it can be difficult to hold our faith belief in heaven and hell and salvation and punishment and even predestination with our the idea of self responsibility. But as mature people, we
Mhm.
need to be able to hold both. One doesn't cancel out the other. And in fact, in my book, The Courageous Follower, I have 5 behaviors. You have 5 in your book that constitute courageous following. One of them is the courage to take responsibility. So
Mm.
we're right in sync there.
Yeah. I am so fascinated by what you have put out, and not just in this book, To Stop a Tyrant, but the other works as well, and the titles in them themselves. I will tell you that my wife and I are in the process of moving to a new location. We are not 100% certain of where that will be. However, we are 100% certain that we have to pack everything up. Well, we brought containers, multiple containers of books from Phoenix in 2006, again, from interviews that I'd been doing. So I'm going through all of these books because I'm giving them to a local nonprofit to sell at their book sale so they can make money for the work that they do. And I was going to sell the containers for a certain price, that kind of thing. And I thought, let's just give them away. So I'm going through all of these books and the titles and some of the guests that I've had on, the authors, such as yourself. And it's like, oh, I want to keep that one because but it's like, I want to pare down. So I can't keep them all again. I've got to make a decision. And so I'm making that decision. And if I give away a particular book, well, it's been out in the shed, which is about 75 feet away from the house. It's been in the shed since 2006. Okay. Now the
Yes.
books are in most all of them, 99.9% of them are in perfect condition. It's as if they came from the publisher themselves.
Mm,
So I think they're gonna do well in that regard. But the fascinating thing is that it's time. I'm 65, and it's time for me and my wife. She recognizes this too. We need to pare down. Now the funny thing is, we started to do that because we were looking for a place to live to rent, and they were under 1,000 square feet. Sometimes 800, 700, 600. So that would be perfect, right? Well, there's a place that we're looking at right now that we're hoping to buy. It's 14,000 square feet. So it's like,
oh my God.
we got more than enough room. So I could go ahead and keep them all. And you know what? I'm still in the mindset of no, it's time to pare down.
Mm,
I don't need, I'm not, now I'll be straight up honest with you and my listeners. I don't read all of these books that I get from my guests. I don't have that kind of time, but I do go through it. And I love a technique that I was taught when I first started interviewing about taking tables of contents and turning those into questions. And one of the questions I have for you, and the reason I brought up the whole book thing is because to me, when you go through your library and you just flash through the titles that flash memories in your mind of that conversation, I'm thinking here, you mentioned the founding fathers. Now, you've got a couple of chapters in here that talk about number one, you and the foundation of political power, but you also have the populist circle, the crowd, and the individual. And I want to bring this up because I would love for you to address this. In the Declaration of Independence, we the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare. All right, I know I missed one about the common defense. Promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain, etc. Now, when COVID broke out for about 3 months, I thought, if we just do what the government's asking us to do for 3 months, set aside all of the other rancor that went on after that, we might be through this. We'll be done with it in 3 months if people will just stay home, stay 6 feet apart, wash your hands, etc., etc., wear a mask. And then, of course, individuality popped in. First Amendment rights popped in and so forth. And then I went to that phrase in the Declaration. Now, it's not part of the Constitution in terms of law, but I would ask this question of people who felt impelled to do whatever the heck they wanted. First Amendment, I can do whatever I want, when I want, how I want, to whom I want, etc., etc., etc. And I'm going, okay, so how do you balance promoting the general welfare, i.e. the 3 rules of COVID, mask up, wash up, and step back, with promoting and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity? Who's our posterity? Our children. And so now that phrase refers to the crowd, the community. How does one balance those 2 elements? So you've got this dynamic out in the zeitgeist. So how do we reach a place of compromise with things like that dynamic in order to, if it's necessary to stop a tyrant, for the followers to step in and say, hey, stop. What you're doing is it's not going to work, because if you think through it logically, etc., etc., etc. Can you talk to us about that dynamic in terms of coming to a place of compromise? Was that part of the foundation of political power? I guess you might say from the beginning.
You're asking questions that political philosophers have chewed on for at least a couple of thousand years. Where does the right of the individual and the right of the community begin? And we know the simple thing is that you know the right of my fist ends before your nose.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what happens? Character is so important
Mm-hmm.
to no matter what kind of government we have. Character is usually important. What shapes character? Our religious institutions, our educational institutions, our athletic institutions, our family. We need to, and many, many, many people are working on this. It's not something that is done through a government. It's done through people, through thousands and thousands of initiatives to keep building character, to keep helping young people develop character. Now, having said that, ultimately you need to have some rules. And if you have rules, you have to have a way of ideally encouraging them to be followed, but if not, enforcing them to be followed.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the justice system comes in, you
Right.
see. Now, none of this is easy, like where the line is drawn, where does compassion and uh, justice and mercy and correct retribution fit in. None of this is easy. This requires continuous maturing as individuals, as communities, as a race. This is why I love your mission statement, because I think that's what you're about. You won't solve it in your lifetime. I certainly won't in my lifetime because I'm older than you. But each of us we're called to do our part.
Mm.
And I'm hoping that extends to the listeners who have been um, engaged enough to have spent this much time with us. Um, I would like to, if I may, encourage people to go and look at my various books at my website, which I guess you'll put up somewhere.
Oh, yes, we'll be linked to your website. Absolutely.
Ira Chaleff author.com, but of course you can't spell Ira Chaleff unless you see it somewhere. So please put it up there.
Absolutely.
And I'll continue doing what I can do for as long as I can. You will for as long as you can. And we don't know what wonderful listeners are going to be doing for as long as they can. But
Mhm.
that is the way we will evolve.
Yeah. And one element to toss in there too, in regards to that dynamic is raising the question, and it's not exclusively having to do with COVID. It's having to do with whatever I do. Um, we are all connected in one way, shape, or another, and there's a metaphysical aspect of the connection that we talk about on this program as well. And that aspect I mentioned earlier, and that is the individual touting his individual rights, which he's perfectly free, and I support and defend his right to do so. But the question I pose is, what about your responsibility if you step across that line? And I'm not saying punching someone in the fist. I'm saying, you know, and I know that there have been some court cases back, I think it was maybe in the 80s, early 90s, regarding maybe it was the ground zero person who had started with AIDS and was having sex with people and wasn't telling them. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. You are now violating their personal individual right to choose whether they want to have sex with you because they know you have this disease, whether it's AIDS, whether it's pneumonia, whether it's the flu, whether it's whatever it is, just in terms of, let's say, a communicable situation. Where
You
is
know,
your responsibility as an individual to the community?
during COVID, I this is almost accidentally,
Hmm.
but I was doing two things. One, I was reading de Tocqueville or about de Tocqueville, who wrote The Great Democracy in America.
Hmm.
And he had sailed with a friend of his from France and came to America for about 11 months. Actually, it was to study our penitentiary system. But he was such a great observer that when he wrote up his observations, it became a book that for 200 years, political scientists of American culture and history refer to. What I found so interesting was when he sailed back, his ship he was not allowed to get off his ship in Gibraltar
Mm.
for 2 weeks because they needed to know that nobody on the ship had plague. And it was only by 2 weeks of isolation could the community be sure that they wouldn't be bringing a plague onto shore. And then I read another similar one that took place even earlier. And I realized that, human beings, we're intelligent and we come up with reasonable ways of protecting the community as best we can. Because of modern medicine, we had been so free of plague for so long that we
Mm.
forgot these simple rules. So we rehabilitate the rules, we propagate them, and then, as necessary, we enforce them if um, good character and communal allegiance isn't enough to adhere to them.
Yeah. I know too, in regards to the title, To Stop a Tyrant, that for those who want to do so, it's not enough to tell them, which I would. You do realize that this person isn't going to live forever. So this will come to an end eventually. Maybe not in your lifetime if you're older than the so-called tyrant. But then you have to then start asking that question, which you do, and that is how? How do you begin that process through the systems that are being accused of being flawed and damaged and so on and so forth? Uh, because obviously going through what we went through, whether it be the Revolutionary War, whether it be the Civil War in particular, um, we end up destroying incredible potential. We have no idea what those people might have contributed to our society
Mm.
to help us to evolve and move forward if they had lived. And that's kind of how I look at that when we send people overseas. And I'm not taking a position on whether we should or shouldn't. I'm just saying that when we do that and our people die in combat, the lost potential they could have contributed to our society, to their families, is like who was it? I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson. I was watching one of his little short videos talking about this concept of aliens observing planet Earth and so forth, looking for intelligent life in the universe. And they watch us griping and complaining and fighting and killing and blowing up this and doing that and so on and so forth. And they make the conclusion, well, I guess there's no intelligent life here. It's really
Well,
it's a question that I think we need to try to address. It's like, okay, we're not looking at overthrowing anybody. That's not the goal. I don't believe that that's your goal, to overthrow a tyrant. There has to be a peaceful, nonviolent way to do that. And I think the subtitle of The Power of the Political Followers, they're the ones that have to make the decision as to whether or not this person continues on.
yes. My audiobook will be coming out very soon,
Oh,
and I have elected to shorten the subtitle. I'm not as fond of the subtitle as the publisher was
ah,
because I think it's a little harsh to say the power of political followers to make or break a toxic leader. It's assuming the leader's toxic.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Leader isn't necessarily toxic, but they could be just becoming um, too much of a center of power for any human being to have. And so, so I prefer the power of political followers. And in my book, wherever you are, you will find ideas and thoughts about what is your power, regardless of where you are in the political spectrum, to help the leaders that are in office to use their power well and restrain them from over aggrandizing power, which never works out in history, never works out.
Mm, yeah.
How's that for a final thought?
That's good. That's very good. And again, we're not taking positions either way. We're observing what's going on and trying to enlighten people as to our perspectives. And I'm not saying that mine is right and yours is wrong or vice versa. It's just the way we see things. And you've put it down into this book, To Stop a Tyrant. And we hope that people will go to your website, which is irachaleffauthor.com. Will be linked. That's IRACHALEFFAUTHOR.com. That's IraChaleffauthor.com. And we hope that you will go there to pick up a copy of To Stop a Tyrant. I'm Richard Dugan along with Ira Chaleff. And Ira, this has just been a fascinating conversation. I often talk about there's a phrase that was given to me, a quote, when I was 21, and I was thinking that I had all the good answers. I mean, and of course, young people tend to do that. And someone said to me, very kindly, by the way, Richard, I offer you this. It is better to begin in doubt and end in certainty than to begin in certainty and end in doubt. And in one of my interviews about a year or so ago, we were chatting away and I shared my observations. And my guest said, yeah, well, let me just share something with you. And I listened intently. And after he was done, I paused for 2 or 3 seconds and I said, well, there's another one of my straw huts up in flame. Well, I will tell you, I would rather burn them all to the ground and start over if that's what's necessary. As I said to my eldest sister, my late sister, we were having this conversation. She was challenging my salvation. And I said, well, sis, the thing is that my beliefs of yesterday are not my beliefs of today, are not my beliefs of tomorrow, because I'm still alive. I'm still growing and learning and experiencing and meeting people and so forth. And so where I'm at today with you, Ira, I'm going to be somewhere else tomorrow. But I'm hoping that it is that evolutionary process that takes me closer to understanding both my role in my life and that of other people around me, such as yourself, but also a better understanding, not complete, but a better understanding of the big picture of who I am, why I'm here, and what I'm supposed to be doing here. So thank you so much for enlightening us on all of these aspects, though politics may be the part of the title or part of the conversation in terms of the chapters, but I know that it transcends religion and corporation, economics, because there are proto-tyrants in all of these different areas. And thank you for enlightening us on that.
Thank you so much. Blessings on your new home when it materializes.
Thank you. I do have three final questions for you, my friend, before I let you go. But before I ask those of you, I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world, giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., 9 times. And we are streaming live at those times at richarddugan.com. Podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher. We're on YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. And I hope you will in this case, because I love your background, Ira. That is really very cool looking. The
The
mountains.
beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains where I
It's
live.
it's gorgeous. It really is. We also ask if you can go to Amazon.com and pick up a copy of my book, which is Choices, 5 Steps for Life. And then if you can leave us a tip, our tip jar is called PayPal. And we ask that you go there and give what you can, tip us what you can. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. And finally, we ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. And with all of that, we move to those final three questions for our guest, the author of To Stop a Tyrant. The first of those three questions is, who is Ira Chaleff?
If you go to my Amazon page, you'll see that I am someone who is dedicated to the admiring the beauty of the world in which we are gifted to live and doing what I can to reduce the amount of human caused suffering.
Hmm.
Suffering is inherent in living, but how do we reduce unnecessary suffering that humans cause to other humans? That's what I'm about.
What gets you up in the morning?
Ah, well, that keeps changing. Um, uh, right now, I think it's really the love of my life. She just brings such joy to my heart, and we're both late in life
Mhm.
and have been gifted on finding each other, and it my life sings as a result.
Hmm. And the final question, what was your best day?
Wow. I think I will say it was when the man who became the publisher of my first book, The Courageous Follower, called me to tell me why he was so interested in the book. Because little did I know then that that would really change my life for the next, it gave me the platform for the next 35 years or more to really bring something into the world that really needed lifting up. And I have been gifted with having a whole global community of people who now work on bringing followership into an equivalency with leadership because you can't dance without the other.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us here today. And we look forward to staying in touch with you. I'm sure you've got another book or two in you, and we'll look forward to chatting with you. And I am looking forward because I am a member of the Audible Club, so to speak, and I get those wonderful credits, and I'll be downloading your Audible book when it's made available.
Thank you.
And I thank you folks for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.